Next, I am pleased to introduce our speakers who will provide us with their reflections for the class of 2020. Our first speaker will be Lilly Datnow, followed by student Dora Tobar, and a pre-recorded speech by teacher Nicole Kyoka. Please welcome Lilly Datnow.
Dear class of 2020, many commencement speakers have come before me to address a graduating class that was full of hope and high ideals about how they would change the world. Now, more than ever, the world is calling out for us to change it in a very real and immediate way. I bet many of you, like me, had a comfortable, long-term plan for how you would eventually make your mark on the world. Ironically, this global situation has both confirmed to me the need for change and undermined my plan to bring that change about. In this new landscape, I don't have the answers for what our paths will look like, but this much I know. We cannot pray for it to go back to normal. As uncomfortable as this situation is, and as unready as we may feel for this opportunity, time never moves backwards. This is not life on pause. This is life now. We know the old ways of life did not work, although many of us living privileged lives in Marin may not have felt that personally. And the one thing I know would be wrong to do in this moment would be to throw away the potential for a fresh start. In young adulthood, people often navigate the duality of trying to figure out how to fit into the adult world on one hand, and simultaneously how to hold on to their notions of how they want to change that world on the other hand. Their ideals may be crushed under the rigidity of a system that seems too big to take on, and their dreams may fade in the face of the difficult reality of adult life. What this situation is showing us is that the systems may not be so rigid as they once appeared. Fast, radical change is possible. In our life before Corona, we may not have dared to ask the question of what we truly wanted the world to look like, perhaps because we may have found that our vision was tragically far from the reality. I hope we see now that the reality can change, and I hope we dare to ask ourselves what we want to change it into. Our class was born into the crisis of 9/11, and now we are being reborn into adulthood during the crisis of COVID-19. How do we make sense of these bookends of our lives thus far? I make sense of these tragedies by believing that death is a part of our rebirth and a part of the collective birth that we are all giving to the future world. There are many ways of being and old schools of thought that need to die if we are to enter into the new era in an inclusive and equitable way. We cannot pretend that this will pass. Corona itself may pass, yes, but the era of fast, dramatic change will not. We cannot aim for the quiet lives of domesticity that past generations may have sought and achieved. In our lifetime, we will see the culmination of tensions that have been building under the surface of Western culture for centuries. We may see the crescendo. If the last few years are any indication of what is to come, then think of what we have been through. There have been times these last years when I thought I would die in a school shooting. There have been times when our world was engulfed in flames by raging wildfires and the air was too thick with ash to breathe, and there was a time on the last day of school when one of our own students did pass away. But there have also been times when our students took a stand against gun violence, when some of our own led protests against climate change, when we listened to each other's stories of immigration, and when we came together into the simple act of showing up every day to care for one another and to do our best to learn. When I wrote this speech, we were only in the middle of a global pandemic. Now that is old news, and we have moved on to a war that is taking place in the streets between protesters and police. I'll get that later. The news cycle spins out one tragedy after another, but do not jump from issue to issue. Do not ask yourself which problem you will solve. There are so many symptoms of a problematic culture, and you will surely be overwhelmed if you take that approach. Ask instead, what is at the root of all of these manifestations? It will do nothing to protest police brutality if we do not also weed out the causal seed of mistrust and miscommunication that is latent in our cultural soil. As Einstein said, no problem can be solved from the same level of thinking that created it. Our lives will be fiery, and that may be frightening, but it will not be boring. Dream into that future. I invite you, while we are all sitting at home, dream into that future that will come whether we want it to or not. It is open to be molded by your hands now more than ever before. As I look into that void that is our future, I'm excited and scared and then excited again. Thank you, class of 2020. I hope to see you again, not after this battle, but in the fight.